The NBC radio building on Fifth Avenue had studios stacked like boxes, each one soundproof, each one a world unto itself. Studio 6A was on the third floor, 20 by 30 feet, with microphones hanging from the ceiling and a control booth behind thick glass. The air smelled like cigarette smoke and electrical equipment. Frank Sinatra stood at the center microphone, wearing a dark suit and loosened tie, reading through the script for the second time. The show was the Chesterfield Supper Club, sponsored by Chesterfield Cigarettes, broadcasting live to 18 million listeners across 42 states. Thursday night, 8 p.m. every week for 6 months. This was week 7. The format was simple. Sinatra sang 4 songs, an announcer read commercials. Sinatra sang 3 more songs, closing remarks, done. 45 minutes of music, 15 minutes of advertising. That's what the contract said. But at 8:47 p.m., 5 minutes before air, Arthur Phillips walked into the studio. He was the Chesterfield account executive, 49 years old, silver cufflinks, smile like a billboard. He carried a revised script. "Frank, quick change," Phillips said, handing the script to the announcer, then to Sinatra. "After your third song, we're adding a testimonial segment." Sinatra looked at the script. New pages, freshly typed. "What's a testimonial segment?" "You'll talk about why you smoke Chesterfield. Personal story, keep it natural. We've written some talking points." "Just a minute, maybe 90 seconds." Sinatra looked at the talking points. "I've smoked Chesterfield for years because they're smoother. When I'm on stage, I trust Chesterfield to keep my throat. Between shows, nothing relaxes me like a Chesterfield." He set the script on the music stand. "I don't do commercials." Phillips smiled. "It's not a commercial, it's a personal endorsement, in your own words." "Those aren't my own words. Those are your words. They're guidelines, you can improvise. I'm here to sing. That's what the contract says. The contract says you'll appear on a sponsored program. This is part of the sponsorship." Sinatra looked at the control booth. The producer was watching through the glass, headphones on, clipboard in hand. The clock on the wall said 8:49 p.m. "When did you decide this?" Sinatra asked. "We've been planning it for weeks. The sponsor wants more integration, less separation between content and advertising. It's good for rating. You've been planning it for weeks, and you're telling me now. We assumed you'd be fine with it. It's standard practice." Sinatra handed the script back. "Not for me." Phillips's smile tightened. "Frank, we go live in 3 minutes. We have 18 million people waiting. The sponsor is paying $60,000 for this hour. You're going to read a 90-second testimonial." "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are, because if you don't, you're in breach of contract." The producer came out of the control booth. His name was Ed Kramer, 56 years old, 3 decades in radio, a man who'd worked through technical failures, drunken announcers, power outages, and bomb scares. He'd never had a star refuse to perform. "Frank, what's the problem?" "The problem is they want me to sell cigarettes during my show. It's a sponsored show. That's how sponsored shows work. I sing, they run commercials, I don't do both. The sponsor wants integration, talent endorsement. It's more authentic. It's not authentic if I'm reading a script." Kramer looked at the clock. 8:50 p.m., 2 minutes to air. "Frank, listen to me. I understand you have principles, I respect that, but we're about to go live to 18 million people. We have a rundown, we have a sponsor, we have a commitment. Can we please just do the show as planned and discuss this afterward?" "The show as planned didn't include me selling cigarettes. The show as planned is what we're doing in 90 seconds, so you have a choice. You read the testimonial or you don't go on." Sinatra looked at him. "Then I don't go on." The studio went silent. Phillips stepped forward. "Frank, you can't be serious. You're going to walk away from a live broadcast because you won't read 90 seconds. I'm walking away because you changed the deal without asking me." "We're not changing the deal. We're enhancing it. By making me a spokesman. By making the show better." Sinatra took off his jacket, draped it over a chair. "Ed, you have 2 minutes to figure out what you're broadcasting, because I'm not reading that script." He walked toward the studio door. Kramer followed him. "Frank, wait, just wait. Let's think about this." "I already thought about it. The answer is no." "What if we cut the testimonial? Just for tonight. We go with the original rundown. And next week we discuss it properly. With your management, with legal, with everyone. But tonight, we do it your way." Sinatra stopped walking. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Because if I walk out to that microphone, and you spring this on me again, we won't, I promise." Sinatra looked at Phillips. Phillips looked like he'd swallowed glass. "Fine," Sinatra said. "Original rundown." He walked back to the microphone. The clock on the wall said 8:52 p.m. At 8:53 p.m., the announcer's voice came through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, coast to coast, the Chesterfield Supper Club, starring Frank Sinatra." Sinatra sang 4 songs: perfect pitch, perfect timing, perfect performance. At 9:17 p.m., they broke for commercials. 90 seconds of advertising read by the announcer. Sinatra stood at the microphone waiting. The commercials ended. The producer's voice came through Sinatra's headphones. "Back in 5, 4, 3, the announcer said. "And now, Frank Sinatra will tell us about his experience with Chesterfield cigarettes." The studio went silent. Sinatra looked at the control booth. Ed Kramer wasn't looking back. Arthur Phillips was standing in the corner, arms crossed, watching. Sinatra looked at the microphone, then at the revised script someone had placed on the music stand while he wasn't looking. He picked up the script, looked at it, set it down. Then he leaned into the microphone and said, "I'm here to sing, not to sell cigarettes." Dead air, 3 seconds, 4, 5, then, "Here's I've Got You Under My Skin." The orchestra started. Sinatra sang. 18 million people heard it. Ed Kramer sat frozen at the console, headphones on, watching the meters bounce as Sinatra sang. Arthur Phillips stood behind him, face red, hands shaking. What the hell was that? That was Frank Sinatra, telling 18 million people he won't do commercials. That was Frank Sinatra, destroying a sponsor relationship. Maybe, or maybe it was Frank Sinatra being honest. Honest? He just humiliated Chesterfield on live radio. Kramer took off his headphone. "No, he just told the truth. He's here to sing, not to sell products, and you tried to make him do both. We had an agreement. We had a misunderstanding. And now 18 million people know exactly where Frank Sinatra stands." Phillips walked out of the control booth, slamming the door behind him. The show continued. Sinatra sang 3 more songs. The announcer read the closing commercials. At 8:45 p.m. they went off air. Sinatra walked out of the studio without speaking to anyone. At 9:15 a.m., Chesterfield Cigarettes held an emergency meeting at their Manhattan headquarters. Arthur Phillips presented the situation. Sinatra refused to read the testimonial on live radio in front of 18 million listeners. The VP of marketing asked, "What did he say exactly?" "He said, 'I'm here to sing, not to sell cigarettes.'" Silence around the table, and then he sang like nothing happened. The VP leaned back in his chair. "Did anyone call to complain?" "About what?" "About Sinatra refusing to do the testimonial." Phillips checked his notes. No complaints." "Did the ratings drop?" "No, same as every week." "Did any newspapers pick it up?" 3, all positive. They said Sinatra maintained artistic integrity and refused to be a commercial spokesman. The VP looked at the Chesterfield president. The president looked at the window. "So let me understand this," the president said. "Sinatra embarrassed us on live radio. 18 million people heard it, and the press is praising him for it." "Yes, sir. And we paid $60,000 for that." "Yes, sir." The president smiled. "That's the best $60,000 we've ever spent." Everyone stared at him. "Think about it," the president said. 18 million people just learned that Frank Sinatra has standards, that he won't sell out, that he means what he says, and they learned it while listening to a show sponsored by us. But he refused to endorse our product. He didn't endorse it, but he didn't attack it either. He just said he's here to sing. And you know what 18 million people heard? What? They heard Frank Sinatra is authentic, and authentic matters. So when we sponsor his show, we're associated with authenticity. That's worth more than a scripted testimonial. Phillips sat down slowly. "So we're not canceling the contract." "Hell no, we're extending it." Ed Kramer produced radio for another 15 years. He worked with dozens of stars, hundreds of shows, thousands of broadcasts. But he never forgot Studio A. In 1968, he retired and taught broadcasting at NYU. On the first day of class, students always asked the same question: "What's the most important rule in radio?" Kramer's answer never changed: "Don't lie to the audience." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you're selling something, say you're selling something. If you're entertaining, entertain. But don't pretend one is the other. The audience can tell, and they'll never forgive you." A student once asked, "Did you ever work with someone who understood that perfectly?" Kramer smiled. "Once, Frank Sinatra." Sponsor wanted him to do a testimonial during a music show. He refused. On live radio, 18 million people heard it. What happened? The sponsor extended his contract because 18 million people learned that Frank Sinatra tells the truth, and truth sells better than advertising. Arthur Phillips worked for Chesterfield for another 6 years. He became VP of Marketing in 1960, retired in 1965 with a full pension, but he kept one secret. The night Sinatra refused the testimonial, Phillips went home and told his wife what happened. "He embarrassed us," Phillips said, "made us look like we were trying to manipulate him." "Were you?" his wife asked. "What? Were you trying to manipulate him?" Phillips thought about it. "We were trying to get more value from the sponsorship, by making him say things he didn't want to say, by making him endorse a product he already uses." "Does he? Do you know for certain he smokes Chesterfield?" Phillips didn't answer. "That's what I thought," his wife said. "You tried to make him lie, and he wouldn't, and now you're upset that he has more integrity than you do." Phillips never told anyone about that conversation, but he thought about it for the rest of his life, and he never tried to script a testimonial again. 18 million people were listening when Frank Sinatra said, "I'm here to sing, not to sell cigarettes." Most of them didn't think twice about it. It was radio. Things happened. You moved on, but some people heard something else. They heard a man draw a line. They heard someone refuse to do something he didn't believe in, even though refusing cost him something. And they remembered. One listener was a high school English teacher in Ohio. She was listening while grading papers. When Sinatra refused the testimonial, she stopped grading and listened to the rest of the show. The next day, she told her students what happened. Frank Sinatra was asked to sell cigarettes during his radio show. He said no, on live radio, in front of millions of people. "Why?" a student asked. "Because that's not what he does. He's a singer, not a salesman." "So what?" "So integrity matters. Knowing who you are and what you stand for. That matters more than money or opportunity or what other people want you to be." She taught English for 32 more years, and she told that story to every class. Most students forgot it. Some didn't. The ones who didn't became the ones who understood that what you refuse to do defines you as much as what you agree to do. Here's what happened in Studio 6A. A man was asked to blur the line between art and commerce. He said no, not because he was against commerce, not because he was difficult, but because the line mattered. Music was what he did. Advertising was what someone else did, and mixing them meant neither one was pure anymore. Sinatra understood that the audience trusted him because he sang. If he started selling, they'd stop trusting. And once you lose trust, you never get it back completely. Arthur Phillips thought he was asking for 90 seconds, but he was asking for Sinatra's credibility. And Sinatra knew credibility, once sold, stays sold. In 1974, a marketing executive asked Frank Sinatra if he'd ever done product endorsements. "No, never, not even once." "Not even once? Why not? You could have made millions." Sinatra looked at him. "I did make millions by not doing it. I don't follow. People trust me because I sing. I don't sell, I don't pitch, I don't endorse. So when I sing, they believe me. That trust is worth more than any endorsement deal. But if you'd done just one, if I'd done one, I would have done 100. Because once you cross that line, there's no going back. You become a salesman who sometimes sings. I'd rather be a singer, period. Do you ever regret it? The money you left on the table." Sinatra smiled. "I don't think about money I didn't make. I think about integrity I didn't lose." The Chesterfield Supper Club continued for another 18 months. Sinatra sang every Thursday night, 8 p.m. coast to coast. The sponsors never asked him to do another testimonial. They ran their commercial. He sang his song. The line stayed clear, and the rating stayed high. When the show ended in 1957, Chesterfield sent Sinatra a gift, a gold cigarette case with an inscription, "To Frank Sinatra, who always knew the difference." He never used it, not because he didn't smoke, but because using it would have been an endorsement. And Frank Sinatra didn't do endorsements. So here's what you have to ask yourself. Would you refuse to read 90 seconds of advertising copy on live radio in front of 18 million people? Would you draw a line between your art and someone else's commerce, even if it cost you a contract? Would you risk everything to stay true to what you believe you? Because that's what Frank Sinatra did. In Studio 6A on a Thursday night in 1955, when someone handed him a script and said, "Tell them why you smoke our cigarettes." And he said, "I'm here to sing, not to sell cigarettes." And then he sang, and 18 million people heard the truth. Would you have read the script, or would you have drawn the line?